Welcome back to another video on Influential Sports. And today, got a special video for y'all. Got Gavin Soza. We're here with me, a defensive lineman for Long Beach City College, Community College football player, and I'm here to interview him. I'll let you introduce yourself, your socials. How you doing today, man?
Sorry, your audio is low again.
How are you doing today?
Not too bad, not too bad. Can't complain. It's been a busy day so far, but that's usually how it is.
Yes, sir. So my first question for you is, how did you decide football was the right sport for you?
So I've been playing football basically my whole life. Um, I started off playing flag football as a kid, just to, reduce the head trauma as a young kid and kind of still get exposure to playing football. But I just decided because I had the most passion for it. It just felt like the things I was good at translated the best to playing football, and as opposed to other sports that I was playing. So I just decided that football was for me, and I just enjoyed it more. That was mainly what it was. I enjoyed it more.
Okay. I mean, that's what it comes down to at the end of the day, what you like more. Because a lot of people have different stuff they do when they're younger, and that's good to hear.
For sure.
My next question, who's your favorite football team?
My favorite football team is the Pittsburgh Steelers.
How did you become a Steelers fan?
It was this might have been this was either 2010 or 2011. It was the Packers and Steelers Super Bowl, and I was watching that, and I know the Steelers didn't win that one, but I saw like those dudes like Roethlisberger, Polamalu. Polamalu was my favorite football player, but I just saw those guys. I like these guys. I was still a young kid, so I didn't know like much about football, but it stuck to me, and then I was just a fan ever since. And then we have neighbors across the street, and they were Steelers fans, so that influence played a part in it as well.
Okay. I had a history teacher who was a big Steelers fan. I'm an Eagles fan. I became an Eagles fan because of Carson Wentz and his progression
Okay,
from his rookie to second year. And it sucked so bad to see him get hurt that year, even though he won the Super
he
Bowl.
was a dog. He was a dog before he got hurt.
Yeah. Unless you see I'm a jersey collector, I like to collect jerseys. So
Uh,
uh, my next question is, what is a typical day of training look like?
so right now I'm more of in a rehab stage because I'm dealing with some injury things. But like a normal day, typically you wake up, depending on if there's a schedule with your team, um, you might have a lift. So you have your lift, and then depending on how you do it, sometimes we lift and then we like train on the field, and sometimes we train then we lift. It just depends on what we're doing. But if it's organized, then I'm usually at the stadium. Um, I'm usually lifting, and then I go on the field. But then if we're doing like lower body stuff, it's flipped so it's from an injury perspective, you have a lower likelihood of getting injured from going instead of from the weight room to the field to the weight room. But for me, like a normal day, I don't do I don't do too much. I don't overcomplicate it. That's kind of just been what I've done my whole life, just not overcomplicated it. You know, I go lift, and then if it's a lower body day, I'll go run as well. So I'll run, then I'll lift. If it's an upper body day, that's usually when I'm lifting, and then I do some like mobility to just try to stay pliable and keep my muscles loose. And then um, then you go home and then you got to eat, and so it's just about putting the right things in your body, which sometimes it's hard to do. Sometimes you want to like go eat something good, but I think the kitchen is the most important part of it all. You got to put the right things in your body to make sure you're recovering, and then that you're refueling, and then preparing like for your next uh, set of training.
And as far as the injury goes, how's the recovery process coming along?
It's been a long recovery because I started dealing with this last season, and then just been through doing physical therapy, and then I went to a new physical therapist, and it's been going good. I just started that a couple weeks ago, so it hasn't been that long, but it's been okay. It's hard, and you kind of have to stay headstrong because it doesn't change overnight, and it's a long process that takes a lot, a lot of just resilience and doing stuff on your own as well. because you're only in physical therapy twice a week, so you have to do more on your own to to keep muscles stimulated, keep blood flow, and to keep that growth going. And then you want to make sure that you want to make sure on top of that, you want to make sure you're doing the right things on your own to recover. You can't just rely on physical therapy. Like I said, you have to do stuff on your own to ensure that you're making progress.
Okay. Well, prayers up to you. Wishing you a speedy recovery.
I appreciate it.
My next question is, how would you grade your previous season on a scale of A to F?
As on a personal level or on a team level?
Both.
On a personal level, I'd probably grade it pretty low since I was dealing with the injury. Didn't really play. Just getting over that, making sure that's taken care of first. Then I kind of made a position change. I started long snapping, and that kind of became my thing by like week three. But I think from that perspective, maybe like a 4 or 5, just because I didn't get any offers from it. But I think as a team, I think the team was probably like a 7. We didn't have the best record in the world, but we did go to a bowl game. We lost the bowl game, but I thought it was a great season for us as a team, like from a chemistry perspective. We had a lot of ups and downs. You just go through the ebbs and flows of a season, and you can either let that build you, or you can let that destroy you as a team and destroy the chemistry. And you can let the little fights in practice go off the field. And so we try to keep that stuff on the field when stuff like that happens. But just going through the process of being human and being a football player, and it's not always going to look pretty. So you just have to understand that, and understand that you're going against other humans, and so just from like an understanding perspective, just you want to how do I put it? You just want to like be there, and like you're your brother's keeper, so you just want to lift him up, because it's a long season, and you got to make sure you're good, and you got to make sure everyone else is good, because a chain's only as strong as its weakest link. So that's the mentality we have, is just picking each other up when things kind of get rough. And every team has those rough patches throughout the season. That's just how it goes, and that's an opportunity for growth if you look at it that way.
And that's super important too, the chemistry, because you see it in basketball, football. Like it's probably a few people with a big egos on the team, but you just got to get past that. Got to right chemistry.
And the cool thing about it was, everyone on the team was, humble. They knew their spot. We didn't really have that issue. And I love my teammates. We had a great group last year, and I think that's what made the season more enjoyable. Is we didn't have any of that personal stuff going on where you had guys with egos, making things more difficult. Everyone was humble and level headed throughout the season, and we kept the main thing the main thing. We didn't make it too personal oriented. We didn't make it to where people cared too much about stats. We wanted to win, and so that was our main goal. We kept that the main thing through the entire season.
Yeah, that's rare and that's special for sure. My next question is, what's the most challenging part of your position?
For my position, um, as a defensive lineman, I think the most important, you say the most important or most difficult?
Most difficult.
Most difficult, I would say preparation, because preparing every week, it's like preparing like a fighter. Like you got 1 or 2 guys that you're probably going to go against the whole game, and so you have to prepare for like how they play, and you have to adapt to how they play. But you don't want to play too much into how they play, because you want to stay like you want to play who you are. You know what I mean? You want to be who you are. You don't want to change too much about who you are when you go into every week. You want to, you want to be adaptable. And so the preparations, it's hard because you have to watch. You're watching a ton of film. You're drilling on the field. You're trying to get the right looks in practice. You're trying to get a good amount of reps. That way your body is ready. Because playing 4 quarters of football, whether you play 4 quarters or however many quarters you play, it's hard on the body. And so you have to be prepared in um, all those aspects, not just from playing. You just you have to make sure your body's good. You have to make sure mentally you're good, so you can handle whatever happens in a game. So I would definitely say the preparation, just because it's not one of those things where it's a it's a small fix. Week by week, you're making these. Sometimes you have to make these big changes, but you don't want to make too big of changes because then you start to throw yourself off. So you want to just try to make big strides as small as possible and just break it up like that, you know, bit by bit.
Okay. See. And my next question is, are you looking to pursue a career in the NFL or do you want to do something different?
Not necessarily the NFL. The NFL would be great, and that's probably the biggest thing, but you want to just keep playing. So, you know, you don't want to look too far into it. You don't want to look so far forward that you're not living in the now. So my whole thing is I want to get healthy and then I want to continue playing, get my education paid for, and then, figure it out from there. God has a plan and all that, and so it's just important to just live in the moment and, go day by day. Because you don't want to look too far in the future and then, you kind of lose sight of what's going on now. Because it's a journey and you gotta love the journey just as much as you want the destination, or you're not going to get to the destination. Because when things get hard, like you got to just keep working. You got to put your head down and keep going to work. And so I would love to play in the NFL, right? And that's something I do want to do. But I also want to make sure I'm getting my education first and getting that paid for. So just excelling at this level before I move on to the next level. Because if I don't excel at this level, I can't move forward. So I'd say my main goal is to excel at the JUCO level. That way, I can set myself up to potentially do that in the future.
Yeah, that's super important. Like a lot of athletes, they don't focus on the educational side of it in case they have a backup plan if that plan doesn't work out to go to the NFL or the MLB or anything like that.
Right? You gotta have a fallback plan. It's not necessarily from a lack of faith, but you just got to be prepared for anything because you can make it to the NFL and then you get hurt your first year, you never play again, and it's like, what do you have to fall back on? Because you only made so much money your rookie year, so you have to have something else to fall back on. So that's why our coaches are always, emphasizing making sure we're getting our school taken care of, because that's going to be our fallback. That's going to be our foundation is our education.
Yeah. And consistency too. Like that's why I started this YouTube show. I want to be a sports analyst, want to get to the ESPN, but I got to start here with the YouTube so I can get my name out here first.
Exactly. You just got to take small steps.
Yeah. My next question is, what discourse about football do you dislike as a defender?
Um, I would say it's a lot from like the armchair quarterbacks per se, just making disingenuous takes, not understanding that people are human. So when people mess up in a game, you know, people will scream, "Oh, cut him" or whatever, right? Or get rid of him or something. But you got to understand it's a long season and there's so much time to, you know, make those little fixes. And it only takes one game. You know what I mean? It takes one game to make that fix. It takes one good week of preparation to right the wrongs from the last week. And then something else I don't really like is people getting too caught up in like the physical. So like, it's like, oh, you're not 6'4", 270, you can't make it, or, you know, you're a little sloppy, you can't make it because you can make those changes in your body. And, those changes in your body don't take super long. And so I think people looking too much at what they look like instead of looking at the film. I think people do that too much. They do it all the time with like, especially offensive linemen, defensive linemen. They look at a guy, he's a little sloppy, but you can fix that. Or you get too caught up in like the arm length, which I think the arm length can be kind of overblown sometimes from like the defensive and offensive line. I think if you can play, you can play because it goes back to like, like guys like Will Campbell or Mason Graham. They got shorter arms for their position, but they were dominating college. So getting too caught up in those little physical things and ignoring the fact that they can play ball is something I don't really like.
Yeah. And I like the Will Campbell thing you brought up because the Patriots drafted him, and some people thought they should have went with a receiver, but you got to have offensive line first. You got to get that established, and he do a great job.
I
He's
agree.
like what he went like fourth or fifth, if I'm not mistaken. But it was a good pick for the Patriots.
Great pick.
My well, I think this next question I had you kind of already answered, but it was what's been your toughest obstacle that's what that you've had to deal with as an athlete?
Yeah, definitely my toughest obstacle was for sure the injury. It happened my senior year of high school. I'm going into my third year of college, and I'm still kind of dealing with it. So that's been an obstacle I'm still having to overcome. But I think the biggest obstacle, if we're going to break it down, was going from the end of rehab to getting back into summer workouts. Because I was a year post-op in June 28th of last year, and so then I started to be able to wear pads again. And it had been a long time since I put on a pair of shoulder pads, and actually got out there and played. So just making that jump, and kind of having to move on the fly because I can't get caught too far behind. I have to try to keep up with everyone else, or move past them. So definitely just it's a lot mentally as well because you have such high expectations on yourself, and then from the coaches, they expect certain things out of you, and they don't care if you were injured or not. Well, they do care, but they still expect things out of you because they want you to be great.
Yeah. Okay. And I've heard you talk about this a few times throughout the video about faith and believing in God. I like that because I think it's super important to have God in your life. Like it's gonna be things that we go through, but just knowing that we have Him to rely on in the Bible and
I
scripture,
agree.
prayer, stuff like that.
I agree. It's so important, and it's really, and if you go to it, if you go to him, he can be a rock for you if you let him, and when things get shaky, you know, he's someone that you can rely on, and he can bring you what you need. It may not be what you want, but it is what you need. And so it is humbling, and throughout the process, you may not like how things are going, but it's all according to God's timing, and just having faith. Faith is important, whether or not you believe in God. Having faith, even having faith in yourself, and just the things that you're doing. But I think having faith in God is the most important thing, because He controls things that you can't see. And if you look to Him, you see the bigger picture. And it's not just about yourself. You know, so and that's humbling, but it's also just it's also grounding. You don't have to try to do too much. Just be you, and just go through your process and continue to grow, and not try to focus on something that's bigger than what you can control.
Yeah. God always has a plan.
I agree.
So my next question is, who do you model your game after, and what made you model your game after that player?
This is a great question. So the position I play, so I'm a defensive end, but I do play some three tech. So I'm kind of one of those guys that moves inside and outside. So it's important to look for a guy who can do both. And he's probably one of my favorite. He's my favorite non-Steeler ever. His name is J.J. Watt, and he's one of those dudes who had to overcome a ton of adversity. He was I think he was like a walk-on at like Western Michigan, and then he had to overcome some adversity. He switched positions, and he's able to set the edge. He's able to rush the passer. He's able to run that arc, and then he's able to move inside and beat guards, and play the B gap. And he was so physically dominant, but he didn't rely on his physical dominance. He paired it with incredible technique, and a work ethic that's almost unparalleled. And so just I don't model necessarily just my game, but I just model my entire approach to the game of football after guys like him. And there's other guys too, like Aaron Donald. I mean, that guy's a workhorse. He just work. He always works hard, and he's always putting his head down and getting to work. He doesn't really care about what's going on around him. He's got to get done what he's got to get done. And then there's guys from down here that it's like I do look up to. Like you got guys like Amon-Ra St. Brown. I'm from Southern California, so guys like that. You got the two guys that just got drafted, T Mac and Mason Graham. Like those are guys where you see their process, and it's like I'm from the same area as them. You know what I mean? So if they can do it, then I know that like I can. I know it's possible for me to do it. But like, yeah, I model my game guys like J.J. Watt. There's some other guys, Calais Campbell, just those bigger guys who kind of have to play under their pads a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, you know, Stuff like guys like that. Who kind of can move around and play chess with different offensive linemen. I think those are the guys who I model my game after, guys who can do everything.
Okay. Those are great examples. I like that. Next, how was your family helped you through the process of getting you to the elementary?
Oh, oh man. Well, I mean, I don't think I could. I don't think I could get this far without them. Because there was times where you kind of want to just you kind of want to stop playing football. You kind of just I'm gonna move on and figure something out. But then you got the people in your family that are closest to you, and then they're kind of telling you to to keep going and not give up so easily. And to just keep working and understand that it doesn't just come overnight. So I think that they've been real helpful in that, and just supporting me, giving me, keeping me at home and giving me a place to live and putting food on the table. Making sure that I got everything I need. Helping me out with school and all that stuff. So they've been, whether it's like helping me study or helping me pay for classes, whatever it is. I mean, they've been instrumental, and there's no way I could do it without them. So it's as much success as I have, however much success I have, it's equally attributed to them because they've been my backbone.
Yeah, that's super important, like having family. But not everybody had that, so that's a good thing to hear.
Right.
And my next question is, now I know you talked about your teammates earlier and y'all having a positive environment in the locker room, but I want to ask, like outside of the locker room, how do they affect you, like in a positive light, or
It's definitely affected me positively because I get to see people from all different walks of life. I mean, I go to school with a bunch of people from LA County, and LA County's it's a big county, and you see all different types of people from different walks of life, and they grew up in different environments and stuff like that. So it teaches you a lot, and it teaches you a lot to be humble. And no matter where you're from, or no matter no matter who you are, like you can do it. So because I know people from all over LA County. I know people from the worst parts of LA County, just the best parts of LA County. Um, and it just teaches you to just be content in your circumstances, because if you're content in your circumstances, and you believe you can make it out regardless of your circumstances, then you're going to be okay. Because I have some dudes, you know started at a D1 school, had to come back down to the JUCO level, and then now they're playing at D1. They're going to be playing at D1 schools again. So honestly, like seeing all these different experiences, it's inspiring, because they have it hard. Some of these guys have it harder than me, in some areas, or they've had to go through more adversity, and they still made it. you know, and then just having people to look up to. There's people in that locker room that I look up to, and I see their process, and I see the way they go about things, and that's the way I want to go about things, because I've seen the success it's brought them.
that's good to hear that it's positive stuff outside of the locker room. Because you hear a lot of stories now about all the toxic stuff that goes in the locker room and stuff in the NFL. So that's good to hear.
Yeah, no, we don't have that. We don't have that. I mean, we all stick up for each other. We all have each other's backs. Like I said earlier, like I'm my brother's keeper, and we apply that to everyone. And so, we're always picking each other up. Like we get on to each other, we joke around with each other, but when it gets serious, we cut that out, and it's not permanent. And we just, we're supportive, and we take care of each other.
Next, how do you feel about the coaches and the other staff?
Man, I love my coaches. We had a coaching turnover this year. So, some of my coaches are on the different schools. But I love the coaches that I've been with, and some of the new coaches. I enjoy being around them. And the cool thing is I've just been able to pick all their brains. Like my position coach, he played pro ball in Germany. So he's been the JUCO level, he's been at the D1 level, and he's been at the pro level. So just picking his brain, and then just seeing how he goes about things, and just soaking up as much teaching as I can from him. Because my coaches have so much knowledge. They've experienced so much, and they have pride in passing that on to the players. And some of those guys are like parental figures. You can go to them about anything. It doesn't have to be football. It can be life. Like one of my coaches baptized me. So, it's just you're able to develop these really special connections with like really special people. And sometimes you may go into it, you're like, You never know because they might be gone in the season, but it's like you can still develop those connections. Because those connections, if you want to get into coaching or you're a player or whatever, like those connections can take you further if you build the right relationships and you don't burn those bridges.
You know, and I have one final question for you, and that is, what message would you have for people out there watching this video that might want to get into sports?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
What question might you have? What advice would you have for people that want to get into sports?
I'll say just, don't try to be someone else, find what works for you. 'Cause everyone's different. So, find what works for you. Don't get so caught up trying to be someone else. Understand who you are, whatever you're playing, right? Play to who you are. If you're not the fastest guy if you're not the fastest guy in the world, then don't try to predicate your game on being fast. Find what you do best and then build on that. Like how can I put this? You know, you're not gonna ask like DK Metcalf to be this little shifty dude because he's 6'4", 230. You know what I mean? And so he played to his strengths and he developed according to his strength. And there's so many dudes like, Devontae Smith, like, he's 170 pounds and you know, he plays bigger than that, but he never was like, he never told himself he's some big dude and he never tried to act like he's a big dude, but he still plays bigger than he is. So just having confidence in who you are and just, being who you are, not trying to, change yourself because, God gave you, certain gifts and you're good at certain things. And so don't try to base your game off of something that you might not be the best at. And it's okay to develop those things. It's okay to want to develop those things, but don't forget who you are. Like I'm not gonna try to be like my teammates. I'm gonna be the best version of me. So just be, and simply put, just be the best version of you. Comparison is the thief of joy. And so don't try to compare yourself to other people and see their progress and see how they're going about things and let that discourage you. Take what you can from them, but don't forget who you are.
That's great advice. And Gavin, thank you for coming on. I think you thank you
Yeah,
for
yeah,
being
of course.
here.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, sir. For the people watching the video, once it's out, make sure y'all leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, a comment on it. And Gavin, you can plug your socials real quick where people can find you at.
So I don't really have a ton of socials. I have Instagram. It's el.s02a. If you want to follow me, you can. If not, not a big deal. I won't take it personal.
And y'all can follow me on Switchblade Ed on Instagram with some more content coming for y'all soon.